Good morning, Bucharest. Budapest, even. Just making sure that you're still awake. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of Stretch for inviting me here to speak to all of you today. It's a real pleasure to be here in your beautiful city. Now, my presentation isn't showing. Okay, let's start. Okay, here I am. Richard Lewington. Plain concepts. What is plain concepts, I hear you ask? Well, I can assure you it is not a synonym for boring ideas. We are, in fact, a software development company based out of Madrid, and I'm going to tell you more about that later. So I'd like to begin by telling you a little story about holograms. When most people think of the word holograms, the first thing that pops into most people's mind is something like this. However, fiction likes to tell us otherwise. From Iron Man to Star Trek's holodeck, to the Minority Report, to Princess Leia's plea to her only hope in Star Wars. Holograms, or rather holographic projections, have played an important role in each of these and many other movies. Imagine if you could interact with holograms on that scale, to be able to manipulate data, archives, and computer screens with the flick of the hand, or suddenly be transported into a new holographic world. Or hold a 3D conversation with a life-size image in 3D right in front of you in real time. Well, now you can. When I think of the word hologram, this is what I think of. Augmented reality. Holographic overlay over your real-world environment. These pictures show augmented reality on a head-mounted headset called, wait for it, HoloLens. Over the last couple of years, Plain Concepts has used AR technology to create a number of solutions for their clients, such as this maintenance solution, which allows an engineer or technician to communicate with a colleague the other side of the world to fix a problem. Or a construction solution, which allows architectural floor plans and blueprints to rise up from the floor in front of you, life-size and in 3D, just like in the Matrix. Boom. Or this one, spectator view, which I like to dub PowerPoint on steroids, where a presenter can walk around the presentation while a camera or the audience can track it live from their own perspective. This particular solution was used in Telefonica at the Mobile World Congress last year in Barcelona. In healthcare, we have created the ability to view CAT scan images in 3D, as 3D holograms, and in real time that allow a clinician to make more accurate diagnoses quicker. This is how most doctors currently work with CAT scan images, in hazy black and white and in 2-dimension. Friends, this technology is now here, and it is changing our lives and transforming the ways we work in ways that we only ever imagined in science fiction. In education, we are starting to see AR being slowly introduced into classrooms. When Microsoft's HoloLens was first released in 2016, it came packaged with an app called HoloAnatomy. Developed by Case Western Reserve University and Cleveland Clinic, HoloAnatomy allows the user being medical students, to view the different body systems overlaid on top of each other. But enough of me talking about it. If you each look underneath your seat, you'll find nothing there. In fact, I'm going to show you a video of me using it.
This is a brief, guided demonstration to show you the kinds of learning HoloLens makes possible. In In the skeletal system, we can see the individual bones of the arm and how they connect to the muscles. And we can see the muscles of the face and how they control our expressions.
He's a happy man, right? Next.
HoloLens also lets us examine individual organs and structures in exquisite detail. Here is the gastrointestinal system. We can learn about individual organs.
So this is interesting because what we can see here is everything labelled, just like you would in an anatomy and physiology book. Liver, gallbladder, appendix, we can see the small intestine, stomach, etc. Everything located, approximate to real life size. Next.
In gross anatomy, or even in a surgery, we are often limited to a front-facing view of these organs. With HoloLens, you can walk around the patient for a more comprehensive perspective. Notice how the best view of the pancreas may be from behind the patient model.
Indeed. So you can see the pancreas here and everything else labelled at the front, just like you would see in a book. Next. Next.
And I'll stop it there. Now that all looks great, but how much learning value can AR actually offer students beyond this wow factor? I could have learned exactly the same things in more or less the same way through many of the anatomy and physiology books, YouTube videos, and online MOOCs, all without having to spend thousands of euros for an AR device. Now, I didn't mention it before, but I have a confession to make. And yes, although I do work for an IT solutions company, I have never written a line of code in my life. I'm not a developer, but I'm a teacher. And so as an educator myself, this is what troubles me about how technology is being used in education. In the last 100 years, we have seen massive changes in our classrooms, from the introduction of cine projectors, televisions, video players, computers, tablets, and interactive whiteboards. But how many of these tools really do aid learning? Or how many just sit around in the corner, gathering dust, and are not fulfilling their duty? I remember when I was in primary school, we had a single BBC microcomputer dedicated to the whole school that even the teachers didn't know how to use, yet alone how it would aid students. In recent years, interactive whiteboards became the fashion, with nearly every school installing them into their classrooms. Now they're just used as glorified and ultimately expensive projectors, while again, not fulfilling their true teaching potential. And it's the same with augmented and mixed realities. From Pokemon Go to Snapchat, Magic Leap to Apple's AR kit, it seems that every company now is jumping on the AR bandwagon. And yes, although they do look cool, we are still not taking advantage of the full potential of this technology. Stephen Anderson is a learning evangelist. He writes a lot about educational technology on his website, Web 2.0 Classroom, and he says this. He says that we need to be skeptical when looking at new technology. Is it truly good for children? Does it allow them to do something that they couldn't do before? Are we just rehashing old teaching methodologies and redressing them up with the latest technology? Or should we actually be exploiting AR's potential as a tool rather than just another medium? Earlier this year, the EdTech website Innovate My School asked educators around the world a single question. What can we learn from the past decade of educational technology? Professor Steve Molyneux, the CEO of the Tablet Academy, said this: ever since the development of IT-based educational technologies in the 1970s, we have been promised the dream of technology that will transform teaching and learning. And yet, almost 50 years later, we are still teaching using the same paradigms and pedagogical methods. In essence, we are the only sector of society that has not undergone a 21st century change or transformation. If you reflect on the way you shop, communicate with family and friends, bank, and interact with your government, now think about how pupils are taught, and you'll see what he means. Just think about that for a second. Samir is a model designed to help educators infuse technology into teaching and learning. Popularized by Dr. Ruben Pentadura, the model supports and enables teachers to design, develop, and infuse digital learning experiences that utilize technology. The goal is to transform learning experiences so that they result in higher levels of achievement for students. Now, if you look at the S, this is where we are currently at with AR. The technology is just a substitute. It just enhances the learning experience. So how can we bring it up the scale and take it to R, to redefine? Einstein said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. This is what we want to do with our students, not just give them something that they're soon going to get bored with. If you think back to when you were at school, ask yourself who your favorite teacher was and why. If you want, you can discuss it with the person next to you. I'll give you a moment just to think about it. Okay, would anybody like to share their answer with me? Yeah.
I'll go. My second grade teacher.
Okay.
Very interactive. She had stations for us to go rather than sitting in our chairs all day and listening to her. We had little zones for maths, for reading,
Okay.
things like that.
So you were told to learn by yourselves. You were given autonomy.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? No. Okay. Recently, I ran an informal survey, and I asked about 50 people the same question, and this was the result. They were my favorite teacher because their classes were not boring. They made learning fun. They made the lesson interesting. They were empathic towards their students. It wasn't just a job to them. They actually cared. They told great stories which inspired me. They had a sense of humor, and they made me laugh. They were a little crazy. I think we're all attracted to crazy in one way or another. They taught me how the world worked. They were attractive. You all remember your attractive teachers, don't you? And they made me think rather than just teach by telling. So in summary, we remember and learn better when we enjoy the learning experience. There used to be a television advert in the UK which was aimed at recruiting people to become teachers. And the headline of the advert was, "Everyone remembers a good teacher." It's true, isn't it? So what's happening here? To explain, I need to talk a little about teaching methodologies. In 1990, Miller and Seller came up with 3 approaches to learning, which are transmission, transaction, and transformation, which are an implicit and explicit intentional set of interactions designed to facilitate learning and development to impose meaning on experience. The first is transmission. This is where the teacher is the teller. Knowledge is imparted, emphasis is on the acquisition of facts and knowledge. It is how my parents and generations before them were taught, and in many parts of the world, classrooms still look like this. Over time, the transaction model was established. This is where the teacher is the coach, guiding the students to develop reproducible and transferable skills. But as you can see, the arrow still points from the teacher to the students. This is how I was taught, blended with the traditional transformation model that we just saw. And now, in the 21st century, we have the transformation model. Here, the teacher is the guide, supporting the students' structured efforts to make meaning and understand new learning. The support that the teacher provides is often referred to as scaffolding. The students investigate and learn by themselves, with the teacher acting as a facilitator or a guide. So here's an overview of the 3 T's. The transmission model is focused on rote learning. The transaction model is more progressive and facilitates problem solving and interpersonal skills, but does not allow students to fully explore and develop their potential. And the transformation model, where students are much more engaged because they are given the opportunity to learn through play and exploration, and they're encouraged to reach their true potential. Remember what that person said in my little survey earlier? They made me think rather than teach by telling. We know that our ability to remember things depends on how we're exposed to them. If we read something, we'll probably remember it, but we're less likely to. If we see something, such as an e-learning course or a presentation, and this includes a description-based augmented reality course like HoloLens, like HoloAnatomy, then again, the chances of us remembering that information are also limited. But the more we use and develop our senses, the more likely we are to retain the information. What ultimately helps us to remember better is by doing. Exposure. Think of how children learn basic anatomy: head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Or language. We have an expression in the language teaching world: if you don't use it, you lose it. Language is something that's alive, that needs to be fed constantly. People who are constantly exposed to a new language by living in that country where the language is natively spoken is going to have a higher learning curve because all of their senses are exposed to it rather than a person who isn't. So I want to change the way product managers and developers think about educational product or app design. Now, you've all heard of gamification, where you turn the world into a playable and meaningful game in order to achieve specific objectives. And we see many examples of this in LinkedIn, AliExpress, and Untapped. But I want to introduce you to a concept called game-based learning, or GBL. GBL is applying concepts to interpreting the meaning of existing game worlds, or reframing the game worlds as a playground for experimentation and analysis of concepts. Learning through play, the transformation model that we saw earlier. In 2008, American researcher James Paul Gee focused on the learning principles in video games and how these learning principles can be applied to the classroom. Video games, when they're successful, are very good at challenging players. They motivate players to persevere and simultaneously teach players how to play. Gee began his work in video games by identifying 36 learning principles that are present in, but not exclusive to, the design of good video games. And G argues for the application of these principles in the classroom. His video game learning theory includes the identification of 16 basic learning principles. And here are the first 8. Identity, interaction, production, risk-taking, customized, agency, well-ordered problems, and challenge and consideration. The next 8 are just-in-time or on-demand, situated meanings, something that's pleasantly frustrating, system thinking, to explore, think laterally, and to rethink goals, smart tools and distributed knowledge, cross-functional teams, and performance before competence. From the rise of faster and cheaper flights, 24-hour news, globalization, and social networks, we are living in a world which is much more connected, communicated, and demands more and more of us as time progresses. And as we move more into the future, we need to learn how to survive. And this is where we, as educators, call 21st century skills are important. The 4 C's are critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity, which each umbrella a whole range of important skills that we need if we want to compete in this world today. We need to think about integrating these skills into educational AR applications. So make it analytical, make it collaborative, make it communicative, make it creative, so that the end user can learn, remember, and develop themselves much better because they are made to think and are challenged. So why would you want to build an EdTech product? In March this year, there were 200,000 educational apps on the Apple App Store alone. In total, across all platforms, there are 700,000 plus educational apps at an average cost of $4.99 per download. And the EdTech market is growing. Since 2005, EdTech startups have raised investments of $10 billion. By the end of this year, the EdTech sector will be a $60 billion market. Just a couple of weeks ago, this was the headline to a news story on CNET. Despite the numbers, there still isn't anything out there which makes us go out and buy AR or VR. Imagine if there was a demand for an augmented reality application along the lines of what we're seeing today with games like Fortnite. So to summarize, these are the things which we need to consider when developing educational applications for AR. Does the application transform the user? Will they undergo a personal change? Will the user develop through self-discovery and with minimal interference? Incorporate 21st century skills and GBL into your design thinking. The 4 C's. Does the application make the user think critically, collaborate, communicate, and create? Does the user have the opportunity to play? Is the application fun and engaging? Before I finish, I can hear you all asking, but how can we fully embrace this technology and the teaching methodologies and the 21st century skills that you've just mentioned? What is the solution? Let me introduce you to an AR game called Fragments. In Fragments, you are the detective in a first-person crime thriller. Your room is the crime scene. where you uncover clues, sometimes hidden behind your own furniture, in crime scenes that blend into your real-world environment. Life-size holographic characters are aware of your presence and interact with you, with your space, as if they're really in the room, and they feel real. And although, yes, it's not an EdTech product, it will give you an insight into how the technology can be embraced rather than the transmission-based model that we saw earlier with holoanatomy. And here's a brief intro.
So I'm in my living room. I took the HoloLens home for the weekend. I'm sitting there, and I look over to my right, and I see the director, Kirkland. And she's sitting there on the couch, telling me to solve the mystery. And I'm just like, okay, this is awesome. And I can't even begin to imagine what we could do with storytelling and with games with that new power of having people in your space, in your home. Fragments is this high-tech crime drama, one of the initial applications that we're releasing with the development edition of HoloLens, where you become the main character and solve mysteries that are actually brought to life by your world.
Investigating the death of Jacob Baker.
One of the key things on HoloLens is the world awareness. As we scan the room, we exactly know where the walls are, where the ground is, where the tables are.
Whenever we know all the information about your room, it starts looking for different points where a character could put his hand and lean against.
When you're playing Fragments now, we're able to put things like, a thumbprint on a matchbook that we hide behind your coffee table, so you actually have to physically get up, you find that pivotal clue and solve the mystery. One of the awesome things about HoloLens is, at its core, it's a Windows 10 computer. It lets you make a Windows 10 application and lets you develop these awesome applications that are ranging everything from as small as Calculator to as big as Halo 5. Working with the Sobo Studio on HoloLens has been an awesome experience. We got a chance to actually work with a developer and explore what it meant to be somebody outside of Microsoft making the world's first holographic experiences.
We have our own proprietary engine, like many game studios have, and we didn't have any problem porting that to HoloLens.
It's a very interesting aspect of creating games on HoloLens is that it's so fresh, it's so new. You basically need everyone to focus on this new paradigm.
I really hope that Fragments shows developers that there's a great opportunity to tell amazing stories with the player at the heart of the experience for HoloLens.
Director, we're receiving a call from the Pentagon. Maybe trying to smooth things over?
But I honestly think we've just begun to scratch the surface, and that other game makers are going to take HoloLens and be able to really surprise people.
So that's the dream, a fully immersive, interactive AI model which allows gameplay to aid learning through augmented environments. You see the difference between that and holoanatomy? It's much more engaging. I'd like to close with some final words. American philosopher and educational reformer John Dewey said this: if we teach today as we taught yesterday, we rob our children of tomorrow. Don't rob our children of their futures. Let's make that change in their lives. Thank you.
Richard, thank you very much. When I listen to these stories and the future, I regret my aging more and more, because I would love to be a child right now and be in school using those tools. But let's see the questions you guys have submitted through Slido. So, did you know that hologram was invented by Hungarian physicist Dénes Gábor, for which he later received the Nobel Prize?
No, I didn't, but thank you very much for the information.
Well, at least we can give you some knowledge as well.
Thank
it's not
you.
only you. So, technical gadgets are often attention distractors for kids and adults as well. How can you prevent attention disorders and being bored of ordinary activities?
Ordinary activities.
Like if you overstimulate kids, let's say in a classroom, then how can you, let's say, convince them to read books or, just do, I assume this was the original thinking behind the question.
Well,
so
I mean,
how can you make them enjoy traditional, not, you know, as AR-rich.
But a lot of the traditional
experience.
methods are now being integrated in with technology, as we heard earlier. Kids are on their tablets. They may not necessarily be playing, but they're working or they're learning. And so by giving them content and applications which help them to engage and to help them find that interesting, that's what we need to do.
So you basically say it's not an issue, it's not a problem that they don't enjoy those kind of activities we got used to when we were kids.
This is something that we're seeing now because we're not used to that. But as we grow older and, you know, a younger generation coming up with more technology, this isn't going to be a distractor, it's going to be part of their everyday lives.
Makes sense. Okay. So what is your favorite EdTech app?
I would say it's a feedback system called Class Dojo. So I use this in the classroom, and everybody is assigned an avatar, and depending on how well they do in the classroom, they get a little point, and it pops up on the screen, and it makes a funny noise, and they can choose their avatar. So, yeah, Class Dojo, I highly recommend
Dojo.
it. Yep.
Okay. Yes, I think it's really much on the point. So VR in AR as well, needs significant investment for now. How do you think it will or can be made more accessible?
Well, certainly VR is being put into our hands now. Now we have Google Cardboard. You know, it's a box which your mobile phone goes in. There are a lot of virtual reality apps available for that. So, yeah, it's like any new technology. Starts off very expensive, becomes much cheaper, and into the hands of everyday people.
So do you expect that it's going to be feasible and, you know, accessible for...
Oh, certainly, and we'll see the same with AR, for sure. Yes, okay, it's very expensive, but again, as time goes on, it will be much more accessible to everybody. Just like DVD players, mobile phones cost a bomb when you first bought them, but now everybody has one.
Okie dokie. Well, actually, the next question is pretty much the same. So, do you think that the main reason that AR is not used that wide because of the price?
So the AR technology which I described was the headset-mounted displays. And yes, they are much more expensive. Again, they will become cheaper. But AR is also available on mobile phones and tablets. And, you know, a lot of schools have these. And Microsoft and other companies are working with educational companies and to make them a lot more accessible to people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great hope. Yeah. And what is your favorite VR and AR app or game? And let me add, why?
Why? Probably Fragments, because I love watching British crime dramas, and this actually makes me feel a part of the story. And, you know, I'm interacting with characters just like you are looking at me. It knows my position because it scans the room, or it will scan my living room, and it knows where the sofa is, and there's a character sitting on the sofa looking up at me.
It's frightening.
Very, yeah.
I don't want to see anyone sitting on my sofa when I enter my living room.
So it's amazing.
Oh my God. What's this person doing here? Richard, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Here is also a present for you. It's actually for those who can't see. It's you on this cup. So
great.
It's a nice drawing. Thank you very much
for
coming
Thank you very much.
from Madrid and giving us...
Thank you very much, everybody.